Hi guys, my name is Roger, and I'm building a mid-engine supercar in the basement of my home. Let's take a look at what I've been working on this week.
Well, welcome back to the channel, guys. Working on the car still. Let me show you a couple things that I've been working on the last couple of days. I started cutting this small mold here for some parts that'll go on the rear diffuser, and trying to learn a new process here. I'm using the foam instead of MDF to make a mold. Now I did glue it to an MDF backer just to keep it flat because the foam had some slight curvature to it, and by gluing it to the wood it took the curve out. So far making this mold, the CNC process, this stuff cuts like butter. It cuts fast, it cuts pretty clean. Now there's some void areas in the foam that would have to be filled in if this was a surface I needed clean, but it's not. The only two surfaces I'm using are these top two for this part. So I brushed a coat of epoxy and Q-Cells on this, which you see here, just to protect the foam from the primer. I think the primer would melt the foam sprayed directly on it, so I had to coat it with a coat of epoxy and Q-Cells just to protect it. And this is ready for a coat of primer, which I'm going to put on here in just a few minutes. Also, yesterday I went to my friend David's, who has the fiber laser, and we cut out a few parts. These parts are mounts to mount the rear end of the car to the frame. I'll show you where those go in just a second. And then we also cut out the two pieces here, these inserts, for air to evacuate out of the engine bay. And they're just sitting there. That's not where they locate. They actually recess up in there about 1.5 inches. There are tabs here at the bottom. There's 3 of them. I'll cut slots in the diffuser. That'll drop in those slots, and then these will bolt in up inside. I need to bend these, and that'll hold them in place. So after I spray this primer on that mold I just showed you, I'll go ahead and start marking where these slots need to go and cutting slots in the diffuser to try to get these mounted today. This is on my list of things to do. And as for these mounts, let me show you where they go. They go here. They will bolt to the frame, and then this end will bolt to the rear valance once I know the exact location. Because I don't know exactly the up and down or the front to back location, I'm not going to put these in yet because they could slide. I just don't know. I know what my computer model shows where they should be exactly, but I don't know and can't guarantee that that's real life. So until I know for sure, I'll hold off. And we won't need those for several weeks. We need to make both the quarter panels for the left and right side before I can know the exact location. I need to glue the rear valance to the quarter panels and then align the openings in the quarter panel being the arches and center them over the wheel and tires. And then I'll know the exact location and I can start backing into my measurements to mount these. But I guess that brings you up to speed on what I've done the last couple of days. So let me go ahead and get the primer sprayed on this small mold. Then I'll start getting into mounting these 2 vents and cutting the slots and bending the tangs or tongues to mount those, and see if we can get that accomplished today. Well, here is the first foam mold that I've started making, and I have this to the point of I put 1 coat of high build primer on it and then puttied the top surface where the part's going to touch. It's only going to touch these 2 pieces or these 2 surfaces across here. It's just a 90-degree bend. So this is ready for the next coat of primer, and I'll take this out and spray that coat of primer here in just a few minutes. But first, I have the next file ready to start cutting for this mold. It took me several hours actually on the computer to get this file ready and the mold designed and ready. And this is the first piece to go on the CNC. This is the bottom half of the mold, and we are using this new foam method, and this is a very large mold. This actually barely fits on the CNC and will barely fit in my oven, but this should be the largest part of the car, so I think we're okay with that. This is the first roughly half of the mold or so for the driver's side quarter panel of the car. So let me get this up on the CNC machine and get it started cutting. It may take a while, and then I'll check back with you guys shortly. Okay, here we're watching the CNC cut this large mold, and as you can tell, it barely fit on the CNC. It was testing my limits in all three axes, X, Y, and Z, but it did finish. You can watch it here. I've sped this up. This is quite a bit faster than it actually cut, but you'll get the point on how it cut, and take a look at how easy this foam cuts. It's much easier to cut than the MDF, but gluing this blank together was troublesome because the glue I'm using expands and pushes the foam sheets apart, which gave me a lot of grief. When you cut the this foam block, this glued up block, there's void areas in between the sheets where the glue caused. So I've ordered 2 or 3 different types of glue. I'm going to do some experimenting and see what the best way to glue these blanks together is. I posted a question on a Facebook user group for making carbon fiber parts and molds, and their feedback was to either vacuum bag it or put a lot of weights on it. So I've started looking for some really large vacuum bags and looked at the cost of weights. What the cheapest weights would be to maybe put a piece of MDF on top of this or some kind of wood and weight it down while the glue expanded and glued together. So I need to try 2 different things. One, I need the glue to lay down consistent, so maybe I need to spread it with a squeegee or roll it on. And then I need some type of weights to hold these stacks down while the glue is drying overnight, which would either be vacuum bagging possibly or weights possibly. But once I get this method perfected to where there's no void areas between the sheets, cutting these blanks out of foam is definitely going to speed up my mold making time, and finishing the mold making will be much easier without the void areas. Right now I'm working trying to fill in these voids, and it's troublesome. But anyway, let's get back to watching this blank finish cutting, and I hope you enjoy this. Well, I cut this large pattern or mold here on the CNC, and it was so big that it just barely fit in all 3 X, Y, and Z axis. Actually, I had to make the pattern just a little bit smaller in X to get the CNC to go completely around it. That's what this edge is you see here. I had to step it back 1 1/4 inches, which luckily I had the room on the pattern. But you can kind of see what this looks like. The foam cuts pretty clean. There are some void areas in the foam, and some of the logos that are stamped in it create some little tiny void areas. So there'll be some work finishing this. But this section is finished. It took me several days to cut this. Still learning the feeds and speeds for this foam, but although it cuts easy and cuts fast, it was still a really big pattern and took a while, took several hours. But this part is ready to go to the basement and be cleaned up, and I will brush a coat of epoxy and Q-cells onto it, at least down in the pocket and some of the other areas, which I know don't get another mold glued to it, and I can start working this in. Now there is a big section that gets glued here that comes up about 24 inches where this quarter panel rolls on around and creates the rest of it. And you can see here I bought a large stack of this foam hoping that it would work fine. I've had a few people tell me this is what I should be using, so I'm assuming that if they can do it, I can do it also. But this is about $600 or $700 worth of foam. I bought enough of it to get a discount. If you buy so many sheets, I believe it was 10 or 12, you get a $5 a sheet discount. So it was worth buying that many to get the discount. And I have the next block of foam set up here ready to go. This is part 2 of the mold. This will be a 4-part total mold. And and you can see all the pink here on the wall. There was a pink covering this entire table and mold and everything. It looked like I had ran the Pink Panther through a cheese grater. It was terrible. Actually, I'll post a picture so you can see what it looked like. I took a picture of it. And once I vacuumed up the bulk of it and got the table clean enough to put a new block on it, I went ahead and got this one ready to start cutting, and I have the program ready, and we'll start running it here in just a minute. I didn't clean it off of the wall and the floor yet because I'm getting ready to run another pattern. There's just going to be more. So the vacuum system gets most of it, but I had to turn it off once it got down so deep, and that's where the bulk of this crap came from everywhere. But anyway, you can see balls of it here in the floor. This is what it looked like everywhere. It was covered inches deep in this pink stuff. But let me get this one started and see how part 2 goes, and I'll check back with you guys shortly. Here's a little update for you. It is early Saturday morning, and here are the first 2 pieces of this mold. They're finished. They're not glued together. It's just sitting on top of the other one. The third part of the mold, just finished cutting. It is still up on the CNC. I'm going to go take it off and bring it down here and sit it on top of this mold, make sure it looks like it's going to align correctly. Once I do that, I'm going to take this small mold that I made about a week and a half ago. I'm going to make the part on it today. It's just a simple part. It's just a little 90-degree bend here on these 2 surfaces. This is 2 parts. It'll get cut in half. And this was the mounting flange for the rear valance of the car. I need to get this part made today so I can cut it out and attach it to the rear of the car, and then the rear of the car will be finished. Once we get this part finished and in the oven, I'll go ahead and get part 4 of this mold, which is the final part, cutting on the CNC, and it should wrap up sometime this weekend. And once I have all 4 parts, I can start laminating all of these parts together, gluing this up into one big assembly, and start working on finishing it. It's going to take a while to finish it. It'll need a coat of epoxy and Q-cells brushed all over it. Once that dries, then I can start working it down with high build primer and putty, and trying to smooth it down until we have a nice smooth mold to make a part off of. But you can kind of see the shape of this. This is obviously going to be the top corner of the part, and as this builds forward another 10 inches, this will curve down and blend into this surface down here. It's kind of hard to visualize it, I guess. This is the rear end of the quarter panel, and this is the front end where the intake air scoop will be. And obviously this is the wheel arch for the rear tire. But let me get started making these things, getting this last piece on the CNC, and when I have some more updates to show you, we'll come back and take a look at them. Okay, so the carbon fiber part that I'm making is in the oven. It didn't take me just a couple of hours to get ready and do the vacuum infusion process and turn the oven on. It was a really small, simple part. And I have brought the third part of the mold down here and set it in place. You can see that the back vertical part is starting to take shape. Let me pull this away. You can see where it separates there. The back part, which was part 2, and then this part's building up, which is part 3. And I have part 4 here gluing. This is a spray adhesive, so it dries really fast. Just got a little bit of weight on it until the glue dries. I'm going to go ahead and write the program on the CNC, get this ready, and by the time the program is finished, this glue will be dry, and I can go ahead and stick this on the machine and let it be cutting so it can finish this weekend. And then we will have all 4 parts. This is actually 2 pieces. The remaining 2 pieces go here on this end and over on that end and complete the mold out to the correct height. You can see basically they're going to fill in this little void area here is what it's going to do, and the same on the other corner. And this here in the center, you can see how it rolls in and blends to a nice shape. This is obviously the fender well around the tire, and up here would be the body line to meet the hatch. So this is the rear hatch runs up along this line, and then the part that goes above the driver's door window from the A pillar to the B pillar intersects the part here, and they'll glue together or bolt together. Well, they'll have to glue together. So maybe that gives you somewhat of a visual of what this is going to look like when it's finished. But I'll check back with you once I have this part out of the CNC and our carbon fiber part out of the oven, and I'll show you what those look like. Okay, I have a few updates for you. I made these pieces, these angle pieces, and glued them in here. This is where the rear end of the car will bolt to the quarter panel. There was a flange on the part down here, but I wasn't able to make one on the part here, so I had to make a separate one and glue it in. And I will probably put some rivet nuts in this once the quarter panel is done and set up here and perfectly aligned. I'll transfer holes through both pieces so the holes align, and then put some rivet nuts along this flange all the way around on both sides of the rear to bolt this piece to the quarter panels on both sides. And have them on the other side over here too, if you can see those. But they are flush with the front edge here, so should make it easy to bolt the rear of the car to the quarter panel once I have a quarter panel and all this is aligned and ready. Also, here's the mold for the quarter panel. It is all glued up and ready to brush a coat of epoxy and Q-cells on to harden the surface so I can start finishing this and getting it ready to make a part on. Now this mold is enormous, but since it's made out of foam, it's not too heavy. It does have an MDF base, which adds some weight to it, but I needed that base for stability to keep the foam from warping and twisting. I was afraid something that size, by the time I finish it and use it, could get some curl to it and then the part wouldn't be the correct shape. But left this clamped overnight. I need to take the clamps off and get a coat of epoxy on it so it'll be ready to start working. And also I glued this up last night. This is the base part, or the bottom down here, just like this, for the passenger side quarter panel. So I'm going to go stick this on the CNC, get it started cutting. It'll take a couple of days to finish this up while I'm wrapping up this mold again and get ready to make a part on. I'm also going to be cutting this one so it's right behind it, and we can get it ready to use just as soon as I make a part on this mold. Okay, this is the mold for the driver's side quarter panel, and I brushed a coat of epoxy and Q-cells on it last night and let that harden up good. I sanded a couple of spots today, just the roughest spots, just to see how easy the epoxy and Q-cells sanded and worked down, and it didn't seem to be too bad. I went ahead and put a coat, a thick heavy coat of high build primer on here. Now, I didn't coat all of this area out here because it has the epoxy on it. There's no need to. It doesn't need to be super smooth. I just did the cavity where the part will go in. And you can see that this mold is extremely rough. Now, there's some texture and rough spots out here, but I think there's enough epoxy on here that I can sand this down smooth. Any of the rough cracks, and there's plenty back here, I'll put a coat of Bondo in all of those, and so I'll be able to work those down. All of the seams between the foam are extremely rough, but I think I can smooth this out and make this look nice. It's going to be a lot of work. Once I put a coat of Bondo everywhere and work it back down smooth and sand everything else to where I think it's smooth enough, I'll put a second coat of high build primer on here and we should be getting close then I can work it down on that second coat and hopefully get it smooth enough to make a part on. I'm not quite sure. This mold is exceptionally light compared to what it would be if it was solid MDF. I am able to move this by myself barely. It's hard because it's awkward. It's not hard because it's heavy. It's just enormous. But it's going to be a lot of work ahead to get this part ready. But believe I can do it. And it's actually, this mold is small compared to the roof and the rear hatch. So this part is not as big as I was expecting it to be, but it is what it is. And it's just a matter of getting it smooth enough to make a nice part off of. And the one you just saw is cutting, which is the mirror image of this, or the passenger side quarter panel. And I'll try to keep parts on that cutting and going, so once we are finished making a part on this, all of the other parts will be finished and maybe even glued together, so we can just move right into that mold. But anyway, that's what we have accomplished this week, and guess that's going to be about it for this week's video, and I'll see you guys again in a few weeks.